All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone who's on with us right now for joining. My name is Tim Loudon. I'm the program manager for the Digital Analytics program here at GSA. I'm joined by my wonderful colleagues, Freddie, as well as the DGU team, Lauren, Rhett, and maybe Alex today. So thank you to all of them for joining us as well and for making this happen. Today, we're going to tackle the acquisition reporting section. For those of you who participated in the last webinar we had last month, which Freddie led, we've been taking the opportunity to try to go a little deeper into each of the reporting sections. So today we're tackling acquisition and talking about sort of what this section tells you and what you can do, as well as, in some cases, for our case, what's not possible in the DAP account, which I think is also valuable for everyone to know. So as always, we'll be recording this session and it will be available on our YouTube analytics playlist if you need to refer back to it. And in addition, for those of you who are not watching on YouTube but are attending live right now, we will be sending a follow-up email to you with resources as well as the slide deck and a survey. And I believe the DGU team can include the survey at the end of the webinar as well. We would really, really appreciate if you could fill out the survey and let us know how we're doing, what you'd like to learn, what you liked about this session, and what you didn't like. All right, with that, let's go ahead and get started. See if I can get my screen to change there. There we go. So the acquisition reporting section. So at its core, the acquisition section tells you where your visitors originated from, such as search engines, social networks, or website referrals. And that's from a site that I found on Social Media Examiner had a definition there. I was talking with Freddie earlier, and he was saying that he had this great analogy where basically Google Analytics can tell you the who, the how, the why, and in this case, we're talking about how. How did they get to your site? Well, I'm sorry, Google Analytics doesn't really tell you the why. It's your job to use the analytics and the data to figure out the why. But we can see things like who's coming, what are they doing, and how did they get there? And so today we're talking about the how. And what's interesting about the acquisition section of Google Analytics, particularly for the Digital Analytics program, is that there are two main sections that we're going to focus on today. And that's within the all traffic section of acquisitions. You can see the arrow there. We've got the channels report, the source medium report, and the referrals report. And down at the bottom, very, very important to understand how campaigns work. So we'll be talking about particularly the all campaigns work, but also showing you how you can create those campaigns. So first, where are we starting? Well, we'll start at the default channels report. And I'm going to be switching back and forth on my tabs here to show you how things work actually in the Google Analytics account. But basically, the way we get there is on the left-hand sidebar. We open up acquisition, and under all traffic, we see channels right here. So if you were to do that, and here's an example, so here's on the left-hand side. Notice I'm in this case, I'm just going to be demonstrating in the GSA agency profile. And one thing that I want to note for those of you who maybe are more new to Google Analytics or you have not taken a bunch of our other trainings, I have put on a segment in this case that filters specifically for data from analytics.usa.gov. So if they're your new users, one of the, I would say, core capabilities to be able to get information on a specific site is being able to create a segment that specifies for that specific site and filter out all the other not spurious, but all the other data from the rest of the domains that are in your agency. So in this case, if I didn't have this segment here, we would be looking at all GSA agency data, but instead I have this segment that's specifying for analytics.usa.gov. And analytics.usa.gov is the site that we run that shows live data live as well as historical data on in a public fashion from this particular account. So now it's kind of like Inception, right? Like we have the DAP script on the dashboard that shows you DAP data, which is kind of strange. We one time actually had analytics.usa.gov make it into this top pages list, and that was kind of funny. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. So if we go to the all traffic section and we look at the default channels, we've got the default channel grouping. And depending on your site and the segment that you put on, you'll see different things here. You will almost certainly all see direct, referral, organic search, social, probably other, maybe email, but you also could potentially see display, paid search. In very, very rare cases, there's another default channel grouping called affiliates, but I don't think anyone in government, as far as I've seen, uses the affiliates. But these are the main ones, and we're going to talk about them sort of one by one to really understand what exactly this means, how it's tracked, and in a lot of cases, what the sort of flaws in the tracking abilities are. So let's go ahead and start out by talking about organic search. So this sounds pretty straightforward. What does organic search mean? If I'm in here and I'm looking at this channel grouping and I'm looking at organic search and I've got sessions and users, what is that accounting for? So in theory, it's traffic that's coming to the site from a user searching on a search engine such as Google, Bing, Yahoo, and now DuckDuckGo. So for a while, DuckDuckGo was not being filtered into the organic search section in Google Analytics. It was being filtered into the referrals section. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But just so you know now, Google has finally correctly allotted DuckDuckGo traffic as organic search. And for those of you unfamiliar with DuckDuckGo, it's an up-and-coming search engine that is designed specifically to make sure that your data is private and that they don't, like, as we'll talk about in a little bit, you can use Google's search engine to understand which search terms people were putting into Google, but or Search Console, I'm sorry. But DuckDuckGo, they do not have any ability for anyone to see the searches that you're putting in. I'm seeing it used more and more. So things to remember. The search keyword data for organic search is pretty useless. And some of you might be saying, I don't understand. And I think I can demonstrate a little bit here. So if we were to say, OK, well, in my breakdown for analytics.usa.gov in the last 30 days, I see here that about 25% of all users and just under 24% of all sessions were coming from organic search. Now, if I click through organic search, in the old days of Google Analytics, and at this point we're talking like 7, 8 years ago, you used to be able to see the keywords that people searched for in Google in order to get to your site. What you'll see now is this, where most likely not provided is the #1 keyword. And it's usually, this is actually kind of low. It's only 89%. I've seen as high as like 96, 97% of all searches are hidden in this not provided section. And I can give you a very quick explanation for that. Basically, Google started it, but now even I think Yahoo and some other organic search engines, they started using HTTPS when you input a search. Google does it if you're logged into a Google product. So if you have your Gmail open or you're logged into YouTube or something like that, or now I think if you're using Chrome, you can log in directly via Chrome. If you're logged into a Google product, your keyword data does not come into Google Analytics anymore. So this caused a big issue when it happened. This used to be a really bread and butter report because especially 7 or 8 years ago when it was still available, it was sort of the big time to start to do SEO, search engine optimization. So there were a lot of sites clamoring to see the search terms that folks were using to get to their site and then optimizing for those terms. So when it went away, that was kind of a big uproar. And there's a way around it now, at least for google.com, that I'll talk about in a little bit. But so just so you know, you can see here, if you click through in the channels report, if you click through organic search, you're going to come up with data that is going to be pretty useless. This is all potentially from search engines that either don't use HTTPS or they I guess you weren't logged in when you particularly put it in. I think you can still get Google terms if you aren't logged into a Google product. So anyways, that is organic search. So let's go back to our all channels. Next up, direct. Now this is the one that's full of worms. It's a can of worms. In theory, direct traffic is traffic that comes to your site from a user keying it in the URL, like typing in analytics.usa.gov, or it auto-completing. So now we've got these browsers where if you type in the start of a URL and it's in your history, it'll auto-complete it for you. So that's becoming a rising way to get to sites rather than go to an organic search engine and search for them. So that would also be direct traffic. Or if it's coming from a bookmark. So you're coming directly from a saved URL that you've put in your bookmarks. Now, what do we need to know about this? In reality, Google cannot detect if you come to a site directly. All it can do is find out that when you arrive to a site, it looks through your user agent data, which is the sort of what I've referred to in previous trainings as like the backpack that you wear with a bunch of information about you. If it looks in that backpack and it can't find this thing called a referrer, which says, oh, this person came from google.com, or this person came from Twitter, or this person came from washingtonpost.com. If there's no referrer there, Google says, oh, well, it must have been direct traffic. So it puts you in the direct bucket. That can become problematic because there are a bunch of ways that the referrer can get stripped, even if you are coming from somewhere else. So we're going to talk about those in a second, but basically, if I am actually coming from a referral or from a social media site or from an email or something like that, and something happens where my referrer gets ripped out of my little backpack that Google looks in, it will say, okay, that was direct traffic. So in almost all cases, direct traffic is inflated. Now, the extent to which it's inflated depends on a whole bunch of different things. Depends on what you do, how you run your outreach, who's linking to you, and so on and so forth. But it's always higher than in reality. If you were to take the sort of theoretical definition on the left and try to apply that, it's always going to be higher. So what are the things that inflates direct traffic? Number one, desktop email clients. So I want to make a little notation here that when I'm talking about desktop email clients, links in desktop email clients, this is if you do not use campaign URLs. And if campaign URLs are unfamiliar to you, good news. We've got a whole section on it in a little bit. But at its face, if you are putting links in emails and you are sending them to your users, whoever it may be, and people click on those links and it leads back to your site, if they use a desktop email client, it will most often be attributed to direct traffic rather than email. And we'll talk more about this when we get to the email section. Number two, link shorteners, the bane of my existence. If you have been a longtime DAP user and you've attended our other trainings, you've probably heard me talk about how improper use of link shorteners is a huge killer of being able to attribute traffic to a specific channel. There is only one link shortener that I know of that does not strip out the referrer when you click on a link, and that is Twitter's native link shortener, t.co. And so if you were to go into Twitter and put in a link right now, it will automatically use t.co to shorten it. But t.co does this thing where instead of shortening it to something that's illegible, like bit.ly/xyz42, it will give you just the first, I think it's 16 characters or something, the first 16 characters of a site. So it would still show the domain. If I were to shorten analytics.usa.gov on Twitter, it would still show me, the first 16 characters or something like that. So that one in particular, it does come through into GA, but Bitly, Owly, I've seen like Buffly, like now there's all these different sort of vanity pop-up URL shorteners. And the purpose for them originally was because Twitter was limiting the amount of characters you could use. But now Twitter expanded the amount of characters. They've created t.co, which shortens it automatically for you. So it's not as essential. But a lot of folks use things like TweetDeck or Hootsuite or other social media management tools that have built-in link shorteners that will automatically shorten your links. And what happens when someone clicks on one of those is the way I describe it is basically imagine that the link shortener servers are just a big bookmark database. So if I click on a bit.ly link in Twitter, the first thing that happens is we go to the bit.ly servers, and then bit.ly basically like has like a bookmark log where it says, okay, well, this particular one, XYZ42, correlates with analytics.usa.gov. And so it, for lack of a better description technically, it just bookmarks and then sends you to that bookmark. So as I talked about, direct traffic, if you set your own bookmarks, it comes in as direct. So often these link shorteners are a huge, huge issue for folks that work in social media if you don't use campaign URLs. And again, this is all, that's my parentheses around all this is that if you don't use campaign URLs, these two things are going to extremely inflate your direct traffic, and also in some cases really deflate your social traffic. And there have been social teams that have been saying, we work so hard to get this following, and we put a lot of effort into all of our content, and we're not seeing any results. People aren't clicking on the links. But if you go and look at that particular site's information, a lot of times there's a really, really high percentage of direct traffic, and it's because they weren't using campaign URLs. So again, more on that in a bit. Number 3, referrals where an HTTP link is on an HTTPS site. Now this is kind of an interesting one. So if I am over here and let's say I click, if I'm like, if I hover down here. Now I know this is going to be tiny, especially in Zoom here, but in my lower left-hand corner, when I hover over a link, it shows me where that link goes. So in this case, it's HTTPS, semicolon / or it's colon / www.digitalgov.gov/services/DAP. If this link was HTTP, if it did not include the S, then what happens is if I'm on a secure site, an HTTPS site, and it contains a link that is not also secure, so any links on this page that are not HTTPS, the traffic can be stripped of the referrer. And it's a byproduct of a security feature where basically secure traffic to secure traffic allows the referrer, but in many cases, secure traffic to insecure traffic, being HTTP, does not allow that referrer. So you often will find that if there is, like if, for example, you previously got a bunch of, let's say before you went to HTTPS. So if your site was just HTTP and you were getting a bunch of referral traffic from, from Wikipedia or Popular Mechanics, let's say, like a magazine or something, and then you made your site HTTPS. If the link that's still back there on their page is HTTP, then the referrer could be stripped and it could look like direct. So I know that's kind of complicated, but the main thing to know is if you ever see a link in the wild that leads to your site and it's on an HTTPS site and the link does not link to you as an HTTPS site, then you could lose the referrer and it will look like direct traffic. And then other things I'm not even thinking of. I mean, there are a whole bunch of reasons. Like another thing is redirects. So if you don't set up redirects as a 301 or 302, if you set it up as what we call a meta refresh redirect, you could lose the referrer. There's a whole bunch of things that can happen that get in the way where this referrer gets stripped out. And so the main thing I want you to remember is that direct traffic is slightly lying to you, and not all that many people actually type in the URL into the URL bar. Okay, moving on. Oh, I was going to show you, if I click on direct, unlike organic search, where it tried to give you some more information, there's nothing else to give you in terms of this information. So I think it's just going to say direct again. It's not going to give me anything more. Let's take a look. Oh, it gives us landing page. That's great. So what you can do if you click through direct is now you can see, okay, for folks that got here directly, which pages did they land on? So that's pretty useful. You would think that the vast majority of folks who, if they were actually typing it in the URL bar, that they would go to the home page, but it also says we get some visits to other places, which I could think are maybe bookmarks, but also potentially maybe come from if someone shortened the link or something like that. Okay, moving on. Referrals. So referrals are traffic to the site that come from a link click from another site. Example, a link click from fdic.gov to a job post on usajobs.gov. So if I was looking at data for USA Jobs, there would be a referral from fdic.gov because someone went and clicked there to look at the job opening. So things we can remember here. Social, which we haven't talked about yet, but social and organic traffic are really just special referrals. Because a referral, I mean, obviously, if organic traffic is coming from google.com, that's actually still just traffic coming from another site where there's a link. But what Google does is they create lists that basically whitelist specific domains and say, okay, the organic traffic domains that we whitelist are google.com, yahoo.com, duckduckgo.com, bing.com, things like that. And when it sees a referral that comes from one of those whitelisted domains, it pushes it into the correct place. In this case, what my example was for organic. For social, very similar. If a referral is coming from twitter.com, facebook.com, Instagram, and they have all these other ones, vContacta and Baidu and all these things, then push it into the social funnel, or the social bucket, I should say. So really, referrals encompass a lot of different things, but if the referral does not match one of the lists for social or organic traffic, then it will just come through as referral. And as I just mentioned, HTTP links on the referring sites can strip the referrer out. Now, if we look at referrals here and I click through for my analytics.usa.gov acquisition traffic, what it will then do is show me first which site the referrals are coming from. If Google ever loads, it never fails that when we're giving a presentation, Google gets slow. So we've got here we've got USA.gov is linking people, API.nasa.gov, DigitalGov, and so on and so on. If we are able to, and we can actually click through, I think, one more time, and it should not only show us, so okay, we know it's coming from DigitalGov, it should show us the specific page where there's a link somewhere to my particular site, in this case, analytics.usa.gov. So there you go. So this makes sense. digitalgov.gov/services/DAP, so that's the main page where we have information about the digital analytics program, or just /DAP. But we've also got a few other things coming from web content and links and Connected Government Act and so on. So that is, now for analytics.usa.gov, we don't have a ton of referral data. But for some of your sites, if you're working on a very highly trafficked site, you probably have lots of different referrals. I have found it very interesting to look at this traffic in the past, particularly for analytics.usa.gov. I've seen before that we had, some professor in Colorado was using our site in the syllabus for a class plan, and a bunch of the classes were checking, or because if I went there, I could see exactly what page was referring, and it was like a syllabus for a course some university in Colorado, which was interesting. Just a note, I can hear a few little clicks and pops. I think somebody's not on mute. If you could go ahead and just mute yourself, that would be appreciated. Okay, moving on. We got to keep moving because time's a ticking. So social, very, very simple. Basically, traffic that comes from your site from a link click that's present on one of Google Analytics' established social media list. And I mentioned that includes Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all kinds of different things, Quora, Reddit, and so on and so on. You can get a full list, I think, if you Google for it. So things to remember. Shortened links on these platforms that don't contain campaign parameters will often be attributed as direct traffic instead. So we're going to talk in just a bit about campaigns. If I go here and I go back to my all channels and I click on social, we will then see it will display for us the particular social platforms that led traffic. Now, unfortunately, we don't have the ability to get to, in this case, like the specific tweet. So if I click on social, come on, Google. Okay, so we can see we've got 24 sessions that are coming from Twitter in the last the last 30 days. And then we've got one from LinkedIn, one from Pinterest. Again, this is a pretty low traffic site, so I'm not expecting to see tons of data here. We can see that there was a big spike on Sunday, September 22nd. And funny enough, I know exactly what that was. It's because on the Emmys, RuPaul mentioned vote.gov as a place where you could register to vote. And somebody tweeted that they could see on analytics.usa.gov, vote.gov appeared on here. So I actually saw that tweet. So pretty interesting, you know, when you can tie things back from the data that you have here, you're able to tie them back to something specifically. You can draw more analysis. But what's interesting is that was somebody else tweeting and I just happened to know what it was. If you're controlling the outreach, you can use campaign URLs and be able to exactly pinpoint a specific post or email or something like that that caused the spike in traffic. So that is what we're going to talk about in a moment. Okay, email. So it is traffic to your site from a link that has the UTM_medium parameter that equals email. This is, again, a campaign thing. We're going to talk about this. Things to remember. The email default channel will not have any data in it without the required campaign parameter added to the links. And what that means is if you have an email that goes out to a bunch of your stakeholders and it just contains a link to your site, if that person clicks on that link in a browser-based email browser, it will be attributed as a referral. So if you look deep enough in your referral traffic, oftentimes you can find referrals from Gmail. If that person clicks on a desktop-based client, such as Outlook, it will probably come in as direct. So in order for the email channel to actually contain data, you have to use campaign URLs to tell Google Analytics, this was a link that I put in an email and I want it tracked as such. Okay, other. Other is traffic in your site that's marked with a medium that is not recognized as a default channel. So we had these default channels. We've gone through a bunch of them. There are only specific ones that are recognized. So if you create a campaign and you put in a medium of newsletter, for example, newsletter is not a recognized Google Analytics default channel, and therefore it will be lumped in this report into other, because that's not one of the ones that Google says is our bread and butter channels. Now, you can still get that information. If you track a medium as something you create, you can get that information over here in the source medium report. And we're going to look there in a minute as well. But if you are in the default channel grouping report, and let's say you created a bunch of campaigns and you tag things with 10 different channels, or I'm sorry, 10 different media that you wanted to track. In this particular report, they'd all be crushed into this one row for other. So this data would be all the things that don't match the default channel groupings. So this is the example I just gave. You'll have to use source medium report in that case. Finally, display and paid search. So it's traffic to your site coming from display advertising or paid search campaigns via ads. The thing to remember here is we don't integrate any ads platforms in the DAP account. So I think that for the majority of us in government, most of us don't run paid search ads. I know that there are agencies that do, depending on the services they offer. If you use, let's say, Google Ads, the paid search stuff could potentially come through in this channel report because Google Ads uses their own Google Ads campaigns, and that information can still be transferred into the DAP account. But we don't integrate the actual into the ads reporting section, which I'm going to show you in a moment. So if you don't use Google Ads or display advertising, and you see that there are a couple random, sometimes you'll see a couple random users or sessions in there, it's usually because of spurious data or copied and pasted links. If you know that you don't use Google Ads, I would ignore anything that appears in there. But when it does appear in there, it's usually a tiny, tiny, tiny bit, and it's an error. Okay, well, before we get to the Google Ads section, I do want to show you the source medium report. So now we've gone through all the different channels. The tree maps report, if I'm going to be honest with you, I never use it. It doesn't allow you to use a segment. So you can't actually, whereas in channels, I was segmenting and filtering specifically for information from my one site, analytics.usa.gov. The tree maps doesn't allow you to add a segment, and therefore it's giving me data for all of GSA websites, which is much less pertinent for an individual site owner or content manager or something like that. In theory, what you would do is you could say, based on users, what is the bounce rate per different channel? But you can also just see that in the channels report. So bounce rate or pages per session or things like that. They have a lot of those metrics in the actual channels report. So the tree map was supposed to be just a visualization for that. And to be honest, I don't use it. Okay, source medium. So now, when we've got the media, basically the channels report was for some reason Google mixed up their terminology here because they said, oh, we want to have default channels. Well, the default channels, really what they're showing you is media, the medium that is set. And so you can see here the dimensions, source and medium. They put them together in this report for you. So you can see if the medium is organic search, the number 2 largest source of traffic was organic traffic coming from Google. And you can see we can march down the line here. Now, there is for direct traffic, there's no other information there. So the 39% of users and 43% of sessions theoretically came direct. And then we've got organic from Google, referrals from USA.gov, and referrals from other places as well. So this is a pretty cool report because instead of just showing you the large buckets of organic and referral and social, this shows you by specific source. So now we've got organic from Google is 432 users, whereas maybe organic from Yahoo is an additional 100, and organic from Bing is another 50 or something like that. If we were to, we've got 155 rows in this report, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to show you these top 10. So there's a lot of different things that you could do here. For those of you that have taken other particular trainings that we've offered, you can add secondary dimensions and add a whole bunch of other information into there to get more out of the data. In the referrals report, that's where we can see, for example, pretty much the same stuff that we saw in the channels report when we clicked through referrals. Let me try to get there quickly. So we've got referrals that are coming from api.nasa.gov, for example. I can click on that and then see, I believe, the full referrer from api.nasa.gov to show us what is the actual page that has a link to analytics.usa.gov. When you look in this referral information, you'll find all kinds of interesting stuff about, pages that are linking to you that you never heard of. A couple things about referrals. So there are two kind of mysteries that I'm trying to solve right now that I wanted to mention. One of them is if I go back to the all section for the referrals, you'll see that there is t.co, which I mentioned to you as the link shortener for Twitter. There are t.co referrals, and there are also Twitter visits in social. And I'm trying to research. I was doing some research, and I haven't come up with a firm answer yet. But I'm not sure why there are 24 sessions. So actually, what it's doing here is it's showing you both that this is the same amount of sessions that were coming in the social section. So when you see t.co, I guess what Google is doing is it's showing you t.co referrals here, but it's also attributing them in the channel section in the social report. So that's good to know. I'm glad to see that this matches up. The other thing that you might find is if you have a big and complicated site, unlike our little small 10-page analytics.usa.gov, you may see your own domain in here as a self-referral. I have been trying to figure out why that exactly happens. I believe it has to do with something with going to another site and hitting the back button and coming into a session that's already been started. We are working hard to try to figure out how to explain that, because theoretically you would not see self-referrals. You wouldn't see your own site referring to your own site. It could be, when I've seen this in the past, that there are implementation problems where certain pages do not have the Google Analytics code. So if you were coming back into a page with the Google Analytics code from a page that didn't have it, then it would look like a referral to yourself. But also, I think that it may have something to do with cross-domain tracking and session staying open. So we hope to have more information on that very, very soon. So if you see that right now, my recommendation would be to pretty much disregard those particular metrics and take a look at find the sites that are obviously not your own site that are referring to you. Okay, moving on. Wow, time is going quick. So the ads section. Google Ads integration, as I mentioned, is not available in the DAP GA account because we have 5,000 federal government websites participating. If you use Google Ads, you can integrate it with your own independent Google Analytics account. Obviously, you've got the information in the ads interface, but then there also is an integration where that Google Ads info can come through into the ads report, which is right here. We don't have anything in this report because we haven't made that linkage, and we won't ever make that linkage. So if you want to have Google Ads data in your Google Analytics account, you need to have your own GA account, which in all honesty, I recommend that all of the DAP users have a parallel Google Analytics free account running so that you can have two sets of the data there, and you can do things like implement Google Ads and also Search Console. So go ahead and do that if you have your own account, but unfortunately can't integrate into the DAP GA account. Similarly, Search Console. Search Console is the way that you can get all that keyword information that I was talking about in the organic search section, at least for google.com. And if you haven't seen Google Search Console before, this is it, and this is it for analytics.usa.gov. So if you have not set this up for your site, I would recommend, even if you don't have another Google Analytics account, even if you only use DAP, you can still have a Search Console. It's just you can't import the data into Google Analytics. But the data's here, and what it does is it shows you from Google, and I can actually add in these particular different metrics here. It says, okay, well, the most clicks that led to analytics.usa.gov, the query on Google that people used was Analytics USA. And when they used that, we had an impression of 179 times, a click-through rate, that's CTR, of 67%, and our average position was 1. And you can see the different queries that people are using here. Public Website Analytics, GSA, Google Analytics, Google Analytics for Government, and so on. So this is valuable to replace the information that you can't see in the organic search section of the channels report. And as I mentioned, if you have your own separate Google Analytics account, you can integrate Search Console into that account, and all this data here will appear in here under the Search Console reporting section. So you could have it, you can have it on its own over here, or you can just try to do a one-stop shop and put it here as well in Google Analytics. All right. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time in the social section because it's basically giving you the same information we had in the channels report. And it's very hard to show you everything I want to show you in an hour. So we're going to go ahead and skip the social section because you can get most of the information in the channels report. But if you'd like, feel free to explore this. It's going to give you, your main landing pages. The network referrals are the platforms that you're using, and so on. Now, I have to have enough time to be able to talk about campaigns. So let's do that. So for those of you who are not familiar with campaign URLs, if you have ever copied and pasted a link and sent it to your friends, and it's really, really long, and it's got a bunch of jargon at the back end of it that you do not understand, most of the time that is not necessarily campaign URL, campaign tags, but it includes campaign tags among a bunch of other stuff. But this is what it might look like. Analytics.usa.gov, question mark, UTM underscore source equals Twitter, UTM underscore medium equals social, and UTM campaign equals, in this case, I just created one called deep dive. What you can do, and what if I apologize to all of you who are not familiar with this because I've been mentioning campaigns this entire webinar, but here's where we get to talk about it. You can add on these particular query parameters to any URL that you put in an email or on Twitter or anywhere you want to put it for your outreach, and specify exactly where you're putting that particular link. And also, you can name it as part of a campaign. So if I go here to analytics.usa.gov and I put in a question mark, I can write anything after it, and it will load the same page. The question marks, or anything after a question mark is called query parameters. And query parameters do not change the actual page that you're going to. What query parameters do is they send information to various different systems. For those of you who have been working on websites for a long time, it's very possible you have query parameters that are for other tools as well. For example, often on-site search boxes use query parameters where they'll have something like term equals test or something like that. And that's how they tell their search indexer to find all of the pages that match the term. In this case, there are very specific query parameters that are used that tell Google, hey, when this page loads, Google runs, or Google Analytics runs from the JavaScript. And it says, hey, look at the URL. And if it contains these particular parameters, UTM underscore source, UTM underscore medium, UTM underscore campaign, grab that, whatever they have after that, whatever they set it to, and put it into your data. And this becomes extremely helpful in being able to measure how your outreach is performing. And it also gets rid of all those problems we were talking about with emails and with link shorteners. If you take this link and you shorten it into a bit.ly link, you're fine. Because when it opens up, and I'll show you here if I put it in. So when that bit.ly link sends that bookmark here, Google Analytics loads once you get here, and it sees this information, and it says, oh, hey, they're telling me the source is Twitter, the medium is social, and the campaign name is Deep Dive. So input that into the Google Analytics information. And so how do we build these things? There is a page you can go to. Oh, first, I pretty much talked about this, but did you know that without campaign parameters, shortened link clicks will all be classified as direct? You do now, because I've mentioned it like 3 times. Did you know that without campaign parameters, links clicked in emails will be marked as either referrals or direct? Rihanna says you know that too. Yeah. So Now, the campaign URL builder. I put a link in here, and you're all going to get these slides, so you can just click on the link. But if you Google campaign URL builder, you will find it. It is this page. You start out by putting in whichever website you want. So in this case, analytics.usa.gov. Then you specify a source like Twitter or Google or a newsletter. You specify a medium like email, or in this case, this one they suggest is a banner ad or a cost per click, something like that. I would recommend, for our purposes, most of us are going to use social or email, or you could theoretically come up with your own as well. And then you can assign a campaign name. Now, this is where it gets really valuable, because if you have an outreach campaign where you are running, you're running a bunch of outreach on various different email and social media platforms, you can name it all the same campaign name and be able to see the reach of that campaign across all of your outreach efforts, but then also drill down into the specific ones, such as Twitter or Facebook or whatever other outreach you're doing. So it's really, really a great way for you to be able to roll up outreach campaign data as well as be able to drill down into specifics. So if you put this information in there, it spits out this URL for you. And once you know how this works, you don't even need this particular site. You can just add UTM source and whatever yourself. If you want to just like remove deep dive and write something else in there, it will work. So what this does is, let me get to show you the campaigns here. So I made this campaign earlier, and I hit the site a few times with various different campaign URLs. And so what we see here is when I go into the all campaigns section, is we've got the campaign deep dive. Now, one user because it was just me, but I hit the site 5 times. So we had 5 sessions, and we've got average session duration and so on. So across all of my efforts for the campaign deep dive, now I can click into it and I can break it down into, oh, well, there was one from Facebook, one from a newsletter and an email, and one from Twitter on social media. So you can see each of your outreach efforts individually. Now, this opens up a whole new world for people, but there are things that you have to remember. 1, even if you don't shorten links, campaign URLs have tons of value. So you might say, well, we don't shorten our links, we don't send a lot of emails, or maybe you say our email provider automatically tags things for us with campaign URLs, which, by the way, if you're paying for an email service, any email service worth their salt should probably automatically tag with campaign URLs for you. But if you're not using one of those, you say, oh, we don't do any of that. I still think it's valuable for you to use campaign URLs because of this ability to tag specific campaigns with a name. Because then what you can do is do things like create segments for that name. So as an example, I created a segment for this, and I think I called it campaign equals deep dive. Yeah. So now if I apply this segment, now what I can do is say all visits that came from somebody that clicked on a link that I had marked with deep dive, I want to see just data for them. And you can see now the sessions have already increased because I hit analytics.usa.gov just a minute ago with it. So now I can say, all right, now imagine this was 10,000 sessions rather than 7. I can go here and say, maybe on this campaign, I was really interested in, targeting a specific geographic area. Like if you work for the National Park Service, or you work for the Bureau of Land Management or something like that, you might be interested in trying to send an outreach campaign to specific geographic regions. Well, then what you can do is segment for that particular region and see exactly where those visits were coming from. So in this case, here's me. Now, an interesting thing, it says Lockport. Now, for those of you that don't know, I actually lived just outside Buffalo. I do not live in Lockport. I live in a different suburb of Buffalo, but very close to Lockport. So this was a good lesson for me as well into showing how specific our city location data in Google Analytics is. It's not perfect. It didn't get my exact city that I live in, but it got one that is only a few miles away. So that was kind of interesting. So this was a really cool little exercise for me just to see how that works. But I mean, this will hold when I create this segment, and we've got other webinars on how to create segments. But when I create this segment to specify for a specific campaign, I can then use that across all of the reporting. I can see which pages people visited. I can see which devices, are they using mobile or desktop, specific for that campaign. So for those of you who work closely with outreach teams or you're part of a comms team, I think campaign URLs are crucial. And for those of you who are responsible for analytics, if you really want to help your agency be able to understand where their visitors are coming, I think campaigns are absolutely necessary. Another tip, when you are in the campaign URL builder, or if you create your own campaign URL builder, which we have done a webinar on as well, and you will get links to our full lineup of training after this, you want to make sure that you use all lowercase. And I could explain why, but the short of it is basically some of these are case sensitive and some of them aren't. But what you really don't want to see is have somebody tag something with a capital E for email and a lowercase e for email and have it appear in two different rows, because then you have to do all the manual addition. So it's important to coordinate this with your teams, and my recommendation is if you use all lowercase in your source medium and campaign name, you'll be able to follow the data correctly. If you input social or email all lowercase into those fields, it will go into the correct channels in the default channels report. If you do not, it doesn't necessarily always work. Okay, as I said, make sure there's consistency in naming across your teams. Do not create a campaign name for some outreach effort and then have other members on your team use a different campaign name for the same outreach effort. This really needs to be coordinated. It has to be, if there are multiple people putting things out on email or on other websites or on social media, there needs to be a strategy around it, and you need to set your campaign name and medium and source options prior to embarking on this tracking. I have seen people use campaign names that are specific to a singular tweet. I have also seen people use campaign names that are something they do all year long, and they want to be able to do end of the year reporting on how that campaign did across all those different platforms. So really up to you and your strategy. Be aware that links improperly tagged will be collected with whatever the tag says. So what this means is, if I go here and I create this and I say campaign source equals Twitter, and I accidentally copy and paste this link and shorten it and use it across Twitter and Facebook and Reddit, for example, all of that traffic will come into Google Analytics as Twitter, because anything you see with the query parameters, UTM, source, medium, and campaign, overwrite data that would have been there in Google otherwise. So these things, which you set here, are the be-all, end-all of what Google will get. Regardless if someone actually clicked on Facebook, if the link loads and it says the source was Twitter, Google's going to record it as Twitter. So be very careful not to duplicate these URLs. And yes, that means you need a different URL for every platform. And I know everybody rolls their eyes at that, but I'm telling you, it's worth it for your analysis. Finally, know that copy and pasting links will inherit those tags as well. So, scenario, you've definitely at some point in your life been on Facebook or somewhere and you see like an article from Washington Post or Slate or something like that, and you copy and paste the link and you send it to your friend. If you do that, first of all, if you do it from Facebook, Facebook is sneaky and they put their own campaign URLs on. It's called FBCLID, Facebook Click ID. So that's no good. But also, if, say, WAPO has the campaign UTM source and medium on there, and you just copy and paste the whole link, when you send that to your friend and they open it maybe from an email, that link will look like another Facebook click, because you're keeping the same campaign parameters when you copy and paste it. So this is just a little heads up for everyone. If you want to be good friends, actually just remove everything after the question mark if you're copying and pasting links. Just only copy and paste everything before the question mark, then send it to your friends. So it doesn't mess with analysts' heads, and it also keeps your URLs much cleaner when you're sending them to folks. All right, that was a lot. We're almost out of time. I tried to get as much information out to you as I could. Do we have questions in the last 3 minutes here?
We do have some questions, Tim. I'll go through these briefly.
Okay.
So the first question is about the segment that you were using in Google Analytics. If you set that segment up, does it only give you the data going forward?
Great question. So one of the cool things about segments is that it has the ability to filter information historically. So if you set up a segment that says, I want to see data for GSA.gov, and you apply that segment, you can take date ranges back as far as you want, and it will filter the data specifically for sessions that are for GSA.gov.
Great. There was a follow-up question there about who do I contact if I have issues with segments. For anyone on the webcast, please contact us at dap@support.digitalgov.gov.
Yes, Freddie is our main man who can help you out. And also we've done previous webinars on segments that we can send you so that you can get more up to speed.
Great. The next question was about link shorteners. Does gousa.gov show up as direct or referral traffic if you don't use those campaign URLs?
Go.usa.gov, just like every other link shortener without campaign URLs, will show up as direct traffic.
Great.
So use campaign URLs whenever you use a link shortener.
And I think, Tim, you mentioned only the Twitter link shortener is the only one that actually works and shows up as referral traffic.
Correct. If it's not t.co, I haven't seen one yet that I believe does pass the referrer. So if it's not t.co, campaign URLs are required.
Yep. Great. And then finally, the last question, it sounds like somebody who may not have DAP implemented, but they were asking if there's any reason to not just use a private Google Analytics account.
Well, if this person is a federal government employee and operates on a public website, all federal public websites are required to have the DAP implemented on them as per OMB Memo M1706. And if that person who answered that question, who asked that question, would like to email us, we'd be happy to talk with them a little bit more about why they should have DAP and what it does.
Great. That was the end of the questions.
Awesome. Look at that. Right on time, 2 o'clock. All right. At this point, I will turn to say thank you to all of you for listening to me ramble for the last hour. I hope that this was beneficial to you. I know that it was a lot of information. We are always available at dap@support.digitalgov.gov to answer any questions that maybe didn't get answered here or that you didn't want to share with the group. And we hope that you'll join us for our next webinar. I don't know the exact date, but we do one a month. So next month, we'll be tackling a new topic, and we hope you join us for that too. Again, last minute plug, please, please, please fill out the survey we're going to send you. Really, really helps us make sure we're spending our time doing things that are valuable for you. With that, I hope you all have a great week, and thank you again to DGU and Freddie Blicker, and talk to you next month.